Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking one of the most profound, yet honestly often misunderstood events in all of human history. We're looking at Babel, the rebellion that divided the world. Now, we are going way beyond that simple Sunday school story you might remember about how we just got different languages. Instead, we're going to uncover a cosmic-level rebellion, a completely false sacred project, and a massive theological puzzle that literally sets the stage for the entire rest of the biblical narrative.
Just listen to the sheer audacity of this unified human declaration. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, right? I mean, this isn't just some innocent urban development project. This is a unified corporate manifesto of absolute pride. The people are banding together to establish an autonomous empire, and they're seeking to make a name, which in Hebrew is a Shem, for themselves. They're relying entirely on human glory and centralized power.
And right away, this reveals a stark, immediate tension. On one hand, we have God's post-flood creation mandate to Noah in Genesis 9, right? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The divine plan was always global migration and geographical dispersion. But in direct defiance of that, we see humanity's flat-out refusal in Genesis 11, lest we be scattered. By concentrating themselves into a single metropolitan center, the builders at Babel were actively, intentionally resisting the command of Yahweh. They basically wanted a self-contained empire that completely excluded God's authority.
Section 1. The Table of Nations.
So Genesis 10 centers around a highly specific number, and that number is 70. Now, this isn't just a random list of hard-to-pronounce ancient names that you skim over. It actually functions as a formal taxonomic catalog of the distinct nations of post-flood humanity. The biblical author is meticulously listing out exactly 70 nations that spread across the ancient Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds. I want you to keep this number tucked away in your mind, because it is the absolutely crucial key to unlocking the cosmic geography we're going to discuss in just a few minutes.
These 70 families migrated and established the ancient world, tracing directly back to the descendants of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The text maps out this beautiful, diverse network of distinct ethnic, linguistic, and geographic entities. And this was actually God's intended design, a world filled with diverse peoples. So Genesis 10 kind of shows us the end result of what God desired, while Genesis 11 flashes back to show us the intense historical crisis that shattered human unity and forced this dispersal to happen in the first place.
Moving on to Section 2, the gathering at Shinar.
The really crucial point here is a massive technological shift. The move to kiln-baked bricks and bitumen mortar allowed for highly stable, monumental architecture. And frankly, this fostered a very dangerous attitude of self-reliance. Led, according to both tradition and the biblical genealogies, by the mighty hunter Nimrod, they aimed to build a centralized, totalitarian empire. They essentially felt they didn't need God anymore. They had their own technology.
Section 3. A false sacred space.
Now, the text tells us they built a tower with its top in the heavens. But thanks to ancient Near Eastern discoveries, we know exactly what this was. It was a ziggurat. This wasn't just a really tall skyscraper built to show off their new engineering skills. A ziggurat was a massive, multi-tiered Mesopotamian temple tower deliberately designed as an artificial mountain. It was meant to function as a literal physical gateway between heaven and earth.
And this architecture reveals some profound theological offenses. First off, ziggurats were built on the pagan assumption that a deity actually had physical needs, that God somehow needed a human-made stairway just to come down and rest. Second, they were attempting to manipulate God's presence. Remember, humanity had lost access to God's presence back in Eden, and Babel was a purely human attempt to artificially procure it back on their own terms. It was the ultimate act of corporate self-deification, trying to force God's blessing to serve their own imperial, rebellious project.
Section 4. Judgment and the Scattering.
There's this deeply ironic anthropomorphism presented in the text here. Humanity builds what they think is this colossal, unmatched achievement, yet the text says Yahweh had to come down just to see their tiny little tower. It's such a profound statement on the total insignificance of human rebellion when compared to divine sovereignty. God assesses their unified depravity and declares, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. Now nothing will be restrained from them." You see, unified communication wasn't a blessing here. In their fallen state, it was a catalyst for exponential corporate sin. Being unified under a rebellious banner meant they could achieve literally any wicked plan they dreamed up. Now, it's really easy to mistakenly read this as a kind of divine anxiety, as if God was somehow intimidated by human progress. But that's not it at all. The biblical reality here is preemptive mercy and restraint.
The confounding of their languages was actually a severe mercy. By disrupting their centralized network, God put a hard check on human depravity. He effectively prevented an early global totalitarianism and forced them to finally comply with his original command to fill the earth. Section 5. The Cosmic Disinheritance.
While Genesis strictly records the confusion of languages, later biblical theology infers a much, much darker spiritual reality at play here. We actually see this in an ancient reading of Deuteronomy 32:8 found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It says, "When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God." Notice that highly specific, paradigm-shifting phrase right at the end, sons of God. Later manuscripts changed this to sons of Israel. But think about it. Israel didn't even exist at the time of Babel. The older original reading clearly points to a divine council of heavenly beings.
Look at how these two passages fit together. It's like a giant puzzle. The 70 nations cataloged in Genesis 10 and scattered at Babel perfectly match the 70 boundaries assigned to the sons of God in Deuteronomy 32:8. The numbers align absolutely perfectly. The biblical authors are telling us something incredible here. At Babel, God didn't just confuse human tongues. He effectively disinherited the rebellious nations.
Let's break down exactly what this cosmic disinheritance actually means. Because humanity collectively rejected Yahweh at Babel, choosing to worship themselves and build a false sacred space, Yahweh relinquished his direct governance over them. He scattered them and literally assigned the 70 nations over to the spiritual administration of lesser, subordinate, heavenly beings referred to as the Elohim or the sons of God. God handed them over. But crucially, as Deuteronomy 32 goes on to tell us, Yahweh reserved a new portion for himself. This massive event leaves a permanent scar on the biblical narrative. From this point forward, Babylon becomes the ultimate biblical symbol for human pride, spiritual rebellion, and systemic evil completely opposed to God.
Which brings us to Section 6, Preparing the Way Back. In the immediate wake of this cosmic divorce, God doesn't just walk away. He immediately initiates a plan. First, we have Babel, the rebellion, the scattering, the disinheritance. But right after this, in Genesis 12, God reaches right into the heart of Mesopotamia, the very center of the Babel rebellion, and calls Abram out to start a brand new nation, Israel. And Israel would be Yahweh's personal portion. They are created to be the priestly mediator, essentially leaving a trail of breadcrumbs to lead the disinherited nations back to the true God. And ultimately, all of this points forward to Pentecost in the New Testament. That's where the Holy Spirit descends, tongues of fire appear, and that tragic linguistic division of Babel begins to be reversed as the gospel finally goes out to all nations. So, as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to pause and ask ourselves, what is the true legacy of the Tower of Babel? Well, it is far, far more than just a myth about how we got different languages. It's a sobering testament to the absolute failure of human pride, the grave danger of centralized power, and the terrifying reality of spiritual disinheritance. Ultimately, it leaves us with this powerful, thought-provoking reality. At Babel, humanity tried to build its own gate to heaven on purely its own terms. But Yahweh scattered those rebellious nations, only to immediately begin preparing a majestic, sovereign redemptive plan to bring them all back through Abraham and ultimately through Christ. It leaves us in profound awe of a God whose mercy continually outlasts our deepest rebellions. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this incredible text today, and keep digging into the Word.